Hi, I am Qassem. I'm 39 years old. I was born and grew up in Palestine, in Gaza Strip, in Beit Hanoun, and I live since 21 years in Berlin. And I work in the medical field. I'm a pediatrician with the topic of intensive care, neonatology, and pediatric cardiology. As I said, I was born and grew up in Gaza, so it's not a question you make for yourself. It's something you grow up. It was my childhood, was the first intifada. My teenager time was the second intifada. Politics and Palestine is something which is everywhere, and you are getting older with. And I was involved in the political organizing for students already in Gaza. So it's not a question I could even answer, because I think from day one of my life, even my name was given to me based on the fact that the best friend of my father was in prison when I was born. So it's not a question I could dismantle, because I think my whole life was already influenced by the cause of Palestine. It became the most hostile atmosphere. It has never been Palestinian friendly, say it honestly. But now we are facing fascist tendencies, and we are facing daily oppressive measurements and political change in the landscape, and a clear paving of the way for fascism, if we want to be honest about what's happening, because the whole restrictions on demonstrations, the whole restrictions on free speech, the systematic prosecution of activists and journalists and people who are don't have the same opinion like the political establishment. They are really facing very oppressive methods of the state to silence them and stop them from talking. So I think the only place which is more hostile than Germany is actually Israel. I am organizing, and I am a member or an activist in Palestine Speaks since its establishment in 2019, and the story behind the establishment of Palestine Speaks is also very much telling, because we organized or became a group after the so-called anti-BDS motion of the German parliament, which actually, once again, we come back to the state prosecution of Palestinians and free speech, which made us become a group at that time. And in the last 5 years of the organizing with Palestine Speaks, we have been facing so many different waves and shades of silencing and prosecution, till to clear violence and, of course, arrests, which took its top, I think, in the year 2021, when the Israelis attacked Gaza so massively and killed more than 1,500 people. And in the year of 2022, it was becoming a whole different tone, let's me call it, of oppression, by talking on the one side about culture of remembrance, but prohibiting memory of the Nakba in the streets of Berlin. So for us, for all of us at that time, it was one of the actually most traumatic days, you can say, feeling so much sadness, and at the same time you are not able to talk about the biggest traumatic historical, which was ongoing historical event in the modern Palestinian lives. And so, yeah. My role is like the role of any other Palestinian in this context, is just to talk about what we are not allowed to talk about. And I think, but the most important role is to be actually, try to be a good comrade, to listen and to not to judge, and to have a kind of an open sight for the needs and the weakness of the others. I'm sure that I was able to do that in some times, and then I'm sure that I wasn't able to do that other times. But I think one of the most important aspects of what happened in Berlin since the 7th of October, that we transformed from some groups and single activists to a collective which can move together, influence and being influenced. And I think this is one of the things we were hoping for since 2019, to be able to collect so many people around an idea beyond which group you belong to. And we are talking about constant and like sustainable kind of work, which doesn't depend on one single person, because the most important aspect and actually the strength of a collective is based on the fact that it's not based on single people. And if I am not there, nobody cares, and that's okay, because the work will continue and the cause doesn't depend on my attendance or existence in any kind. And I think within the last 5 years, we managed in Palestine Speaks to grow beyond names and faces of single activists. And if I can say that I am proud about something, then it would be exactly this. I think we are now talking to more people who were willing anyway to listen to us. But I think we are still talking in a kind of a vacuum, because we are isolated as a Palestine solidarity movement in a way or the other. And if you look to the so-called majority society or the mainstream community in Germany, we are barely there. And we are barely in any included in any media report or in any television show. So I think what we managed to do is to bring the idea of Palestine from the activists and the activist scene only to a wider group of people, but those people were already willing to listen and to be there. And our work now is even more important, because we need to reach the ones who are not willing to listen and still disturb them and tell them about their actually a complicity, if they want or not, their complicity of what's happening, because they have the privilege to change things, but they decide to be silent, and their silence is our death. There are two possibilities to approach this question. I think we need, on the first line, to talk about colonialism and Palestine as a clear product of colonialism. And I mean here the Palestinian misery, the Palestinian pain, the Palestinian tragedy, whatever you want to call it, as a direct result of a colonial project supported by the old colonialists and now the new colonialists to destabilize the whole area, and the Palestinians had to pay with their blood for that. And I think if you talk to anybody from the global south, it doesn't take much to bring the connection and to clear this up, and how the colonialism, which is actually exploiting people in Congo and in different places on the African continent, it's the same colonialism which is exploiting people in Bolivia and trying to destabilize the areas there. And on the other side, we need also to talk about values like universalism. We clearly need to point out that this universalism is a European universalism, which takes actually the universal aspect of this universalism, because a European universalism is not applicable for other people. So it's not a real universalism. And what we need is to point out that we need a humanistic universalism which applies to everyone, which means I am defined by my human values, and those move me to the fact to be in solidarity with the people in West Papua and the people in South America and the people in North America and the people on North Africa, the people in Syria, wherever. And I think this is the bigger value, because if you want to have a leftist approach, political approach, it means that we are all trapped in this capitalist patriarchal system, and we need to bring all our powers together against the system which brought colonialism and all other forms of oppression. So, as I said, there are two possibilities. And I think it has a bigger value if I don't need to apply to your pain to make you connect to my pain. And I think I would prefer to apply to humanity that you connect with my humanity. But I also understand that similar pains make a kind of a universal identity. And I think I can truly feel as a Palestinian living in the 21st century, going through time where my family is facing genocide, I exactly can feel much more than anybody else with the people who went through different kind of pains. And this kind of universal identity of pain should actually bring us together to overcome such a trauma and bring us back again to a wider struggle against the whole political structures which caused this pain, either for me or the other who is me from a different perspective. It requires so much effort to think about the future. I need to be honest, since the 7th of October, such kind of words became too loose and lost all its essence. And it requires so much effort to still believe in a valid future. And I think, as our comrade Angela Davis said, optimism is a political act, and I totally agree. I try to focus my thoughts on the fact that there will never be a future in which Palestine is not free. That's how I see it. And based on that fact, whatever happens with me now and which pain we all together go through doesn't change anything about this long-term view or vision. And for me, it doesn't matter if I see that moment coming or not, because it's not about me as a person. And it also, again, it requires so much energy to focus on the fact that I'm not trying to do anything for myself alone, but also for future generations. And there is a metaphor from farmers in Palestine. If you plant a pine nut tree, you need to know that you will die without eating of the fruits of this tree. And a future is possible when people are making things now, knowing that they will not survive to see the fruits of what they are doing. And I am very clear that this is a kind of living without hope almost. And I know that this is one of the most difficult tasks I need to manage in my life. But in a way or another, I think we will be free either in life or even in death. And if we die, we will have inspired our friends, our comrades, our family, and the whole world by the fact that we were such believers. And I think that this view or this approach will be an inspiration for so many people beyond. And I think to me, this is a victory of our minds over their weapons and tanks and soldiers and wars. Sometimes you need just to change the perspective, and you find out that some questions are not being made at all. To ask about the hope, I need directly to think about what the people of Gaza think about hope. And the answer is very simple and all around us. They don't have the privilege to think about hope or hopelessness. And they cannot afford hopelessness. And neither can we afford silence. But still, there are so many moments and reasons and people who can help us to go through this time in which we are led by obligations and not by hope. And maybe one day we will be able to produce hope like let me call it normal people. Produce hope for the people we love as a verb, as something you practice doing every day. Nothing exists for itself on a shelf, but a practice of a daily producing of hope, like as if you would make a coffee for the people you love. There is no future in which Palestine will not be free. So free Palestine.